Why do you suppose people want to listen to you?
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be fair. I don't have a hidden agenda. Not many people on TV that you can say that about.
This is Charles Barkley, a Hall of Fame basketball icon known for his raw power, dominant scoring, and outspoken personality. 11-time All-Star, NBA MVP in 1993, and one of the most versatile and competitive players of his generation. But what stands out even more than his accomplishments is his honesty when it comes to admitting the players who gave him the biggest headaches on the court. Toughness, intelligence, and skill are the traits Chuck has consistently praised in the legends he battled. So let's dive into the basketball warriors who challenged Charles Barkley and forced him to elevate his game time and time again. Kevin McHale, the silent tormentor. He was a master technician who turned basketball into a chess game played in the trenches of the paint. Standing at 6'10" with an incredible wingspan and unmatched footwork, McHale elevated post play to an art form. His ability to combine finesse and physicality made him one of the greatest challenges Barkley faced throughout his career. Fans often compared Barkley's bruising, fiery style to McHale's composed, calculating approach. Barkley needed strength and speed to dominate the post. McHale, meanwhile, relied on his ability to outsmart opponents with impeccable timing. He entered the NBA in 1980 as the third overall pick out of the University of Minnesota and quickly made an impact on the Boston Celtics. Coming off the bench during his early years, McHale became an irreplaceable part of the Celtics dynasty alongside legends like Larry Bird and Robert Parrish. Barkley later praised McHale's adaptability, saying,
"Who was the guy that you knew you were going to have you couldn't wait to face?"
I hated Kevin McHale because he's the best player I ever played against. I have no idea why, because he wasn't very athletic, but for some reason, he knew all the little tricks, and he drove me crazy when I played against him.
It didn't matter if he was a starter or coming off the bench. He was coming at you either way. Both players didn't square off until Barkley joined the league in 1984, but that didn't take long for him to understand the challenge ahead. McHale's signature moves, including his deadly up and under and turnaround jump shot, were so impossible to defend. Their battles were nothing short of exhausting.
Like, he kicked my butt more probably than any player that I played against.
You could not stop him.
He was the one guy who was so much bigger than me with his long arms and his great moves. I had a difficult time guarding him. And then on the other end, he was so long, it was tough for me to get my shot off if I had to face him up.
McHale's arsenal of post moves forced Barkley to dig deep and rely on his own craftiness, which wasn't something Barkley had to do often. What made McHale even tougher was his ability to dominate on both ends of the court. As skilled as he was offensively, McHale was an elite defender who could shut down opposing forwards with his length, timing, and instincts. It wasn't just Barkley who struggled against McHale. Countless NBA stars found themselves frustrated by McHale's ability to guard them without breaking a sweat. Barkley reflected on this in an ESPN interview, saying, "You had to outsmart McHale because you couldn't outwork him." That defensive skill, combined with his scoring ability, made McHale one of the greatest two-way players of his era. In 1986, the Celtics had one of the most dominant seasons in the history of basketball, finishing the regular season with an incredible 67-15 record and eventually winning the NBA championship. McHale's impact was undeniable, and Barkley later admitted that competing against the Celtics was like climbing a mountain. That team was stacked, and Kevin was the backbone of it. He didn't need the spotlight. He just wanted to win. His ability to shine without drawing attention to himself set him apart in a league filled with flashy stars, and watching him play by leading the Celtics with quiet intensity inspired Barkley to take a similar approach to his game during his own career. Off the court, McHale was known for being reserved and humble, a quality that Barkley appreciated. Their relationship was built more on mutual respect than personal interaction. Barkley reflected on this during a podcast interview, mentioning, "Kevin didn't talk much, but you could feel his presence. He didn't need words to make an impact." Despite their differences in personality, Barkley and McHale had one major thing in common: their obsession with figuring out the game and mastering its intricacies. This clash of philosophies played out most memorably during their primes in the late 80s. Barkley's Sixers and McHale's Celtics were perennial contenders in the East, with every matchup between the two feeling like a heavyweight fight in the post. As the years went on, McHale aged gracefully, while still contributing to the Celtics' continued success. Even when injuries began to take their toll, he remained a formidable presence on the court. And for that, Barkley respected his durability, saying, even as his body started breaking down, his mind stayed sharp. You couldn't take him lightly, not in any game. McHale retired in 1993, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most dominant forwards of all time. When asked about McHale during an interview decades after their matchups, Barkley said, "Kevin was one of the smartest players I've ever seen. I didn't always enjoy battling him, but I learned a lot from those games. Numbers don't tell the full story of McHale's impact, but they still paint an impressive picture. Over his career, McHale averaged 17.9 points and 7.3 rebounds, shooting an astounding 55.4% from the field, proof of his efficiency and skill." Barkley often referred to McHale as one of the most underrated greats in history, emphasizing that his contributions to the Celtics dynasty went far beyond statistics. What made McHale such a nightmare for Barkley and so many others was never just his talent, but his approach to the game. He played basketball with precision and restraint, never relying on flashy moves, but always finding ways to get the job done. Whether it was battling him for position in the post, defending his unstoppable up and under, or struggling to get past his long arms on defense, Barkley always found himself face-to-face with one of the game's true masters. He didn't just challenge Charles Barkley, he elevated him, pushing him to bring more craft and focus to his own style of play. For Barkley, McHale cemented his legacy as one of the toughest and most respected competitors he ever faced. Popeye Jones, the underrated grinder. Jones didn't have the superstar status of Barkley or Karl Malone, but that didn't stop him from being one of the hardest working players on the court. Despite being an under-the-radar name, Jones was the kind of player every team desperately needed, the reliable grinder who specialized in doing the dirty work. Barkley recognized that immediately, once saying, Popeye wasn't flashy, but he was relentless. Playing against him wasn't about stats, it was about effort, and he never let you relax. Their battles were never like the marquee showdowns everyone tuned in for, but more about scrapping for rebounds, hustling for loose balls, and outworking each other in the trenches of close games. For Barkley, playing against Jones was a test of heart. Some matchups test your talent, but Popeye tested your toughness, Barkley explained, underscoring why he always considered Jones one of the league's unlikeliest challenges. His basketball story began far from the spotlight, growing up in Dresden, Tennessee. Standing tall with a lean but deceptively strong build, Jones wasn't destined for immediate stardom in the NBA. He went to Murray State, where his remarkable style of play earned him plenty of respect, but kept him flying under the radar. Barkley admired those beginnings, saying, Popeye came up the hard way, nothing given to him, just hustle. Jones entered the league in 1992 as the 41st pick in the draft, an obstacle in itself, but being overlooked was precisely the fuel he needed to push harder. Barkley noticed that chip on Jones's shoulder during their first battles. This guy was proving a point every time he stepped on the court. You felt it, even in warm-ups. Unlike the stars who filled the highlight reels, Jones's game was rooted in fundamentals. It wasn't exciting to box out, chase rebounds, and dive across the hardwood, but it kept him in the league for over a decade. Barkley acknowledged the unique challenge that Jones presented. Guys like Popeye made it hard on you because they didn't care about stats. They cared about winning the small battles, the boards, the hustle plays, and those things add up, even after the buzzer. Barkley often highlighted how Popeye's hustle forced him to elevate his own game, revealing that Jones had a knack for frustrating even the league's best players. Late in one particularly close matchup, Barkley witnessed Jones snag an offensive rebound, kicking it out perfectly to a teammate who drained a clutch shot. Man, I was mad, but I couldn't even get mad at Jones. That rebound, it just summed him up. Always finding a way, Barkley recalled. He didn't just play hard on offense, his defense was equally stubborn. Despite being outsized in several matchups, he used sheer willpower to hold his ground. One stat that reflected Jones's underrated value was his knack for rebounding. In one of his best seasons, Jones averaged nearly 10 rebounds per game, despite not having the height advantage many of his competitors relied on. Barkley respected how Jones used positioning and effort to make up for his disadvantages. He wasn't blessed with crazy athleticism or height, but man, he worked harder than anyone to get those boards. You had to fight him for every inch. Though his contributions rarely got the glory, Barkley has always praised player Jones for embodying the spirit of the league. Barkley explained, NBA basketball isn't just about stars. It's about grinders, players who push you to your limits and make the game what it is. Popeye was that guy for me, a constant test. Even after Jones retired, Barkley often found himself mentioning him during interviews about the toughest competitors he faced. Jones stood out, not because he was dropping 40 points, but because he made you dig deeper for everything. It's the kind of toughness you don't see often, Barkley said, reflecting on their matchups. For Barkley, battling Jones was more than just a basketball game. It was about facing the kind of opponent who refused to back down, no matter the circumstances. That persistence earned Jones a spot in Barkley's memory as one of the league's unlikeliest but most respected competitors. And players like Jones reminded Barkley of the values that don't show up in box scores: the grit, the sacrifice, the relentlessness. He wasn't the guy who dominated headlines or lit up all-star games. His career was built on heart, hustle, and refusing to quit. Barkley captured it best when he said, "The players who make you respect the grind, they're the backbone of this league." Jones deserves more credit for being exactly that. Though Jones's name might not appear alongside the legends of the game, his reputation among players is solid, even among Hall of Famers like Barkley. In his eyes, Jones embodied what it means to be tough, competitive, and indispensable. And sometimes, being undervalued makes victories all the more satisfying. Larry Bird, the genius competitor. A 6'9" forward who could shoot, pass, defend, and lead like no other. But more than his physical skills, Bird was arguably the smartest player to ever step on a court. Barkley, one of Bird's fiercest rivals, admitted in numerous interviews how difficult it was to face Bird's calculated, relentless play style. Barkley famously said, "Larry wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the strongest, but he was the smartest player I ever faced. His brilliance on the court frustrated and shattered even the most skilled defenders. Bird didn't just beat you on the scoreboard, he demoralized you in the process." But before Bird was dominating the NBA, his journey began in humble surroundings in French Lick, Indiana. Growing up in a small-town, working-class environment made Bird tough and incredibly disciplined. Basketball was never just his talent, but his escape. Bird practiced tirelessly at his local gyms and driveways, working on every aspect of his game without distractions. He turned hard work into his greatest weapon, which Barkley often pointed to as something that separated Bird from his peers. Larry wasn't given anything. He earned those skills. He beat you because he knew how to use what he had better than anyone else, Barkley said, reflecting on Bird's disciplined roots. Those tough beginnings shaped Bird's unshakable mentality, a mentality Barkley later admired, even as he struggled against it on the court. Bird's not-so-storybook childhood saw him navigating hardships, including losing his father to suicide at a young age. For Bird, basketball provided structure and purpose, allowing him to channel all his energy into mastering the finer details of the game. Bird's rise to greatness began with his transition into college basketball at Indiana State University. While most elite talents flocked to powerhouse programs, Bird opted for a smaller school, staying true to his modest roots. Barkley once noted how Bird's decision to play for Indiana State spoke volumes about his character. Larry didn't care about fame back then, or ever. He just wanted to play basketball and work hard enough to prove he could win. At Indiana State, Bird became a legend in his own right, carrying the team to an undefeated regular season in 1979 and later leading them to the NCAA championship game against Michigan State, led by another budding superstar, Magic Johnson. Although Bird's team fell short, this game ignited one of the greatest rivalries and friendships in basketball history. Barkley has often emphasized how Bird's college years laid the groundwork for his winning mentality. Larry just wanted to win, man. Whether it was college or the NBA, he didn't stop until he found every possible way to beat you, Barkley said in an interview. Entering the NBA in 1979, Bird brought his no-nonsense style to the Boston Celtics, and immediately the team transformed. Barkley described Bird's arrival to the NBA as watching a guy create magic out of nothing. His meticulous approach to the game was unparalleled. Barkley recalled how Bird's basketball IQ made him impossible to guard. Larry studied everything about you, your tendencies, your moves, even your confidence level. Then he'd use that information to pick you apart. One of the Bird's most celebrated traits was his ability to talk trash like a true artist. What separated Bird's trash talk from others? Precision. His words backed up his actions on the court, and his opponents knew it. Barkley recounted stories about Bird calling out plays during games, saying things like, "I'm going to shoot it right here in your face," and then executing them with ease. Barkley acknowledged how Bird's trash talk could rattle even the most composed players, saying Larry didn't just talk. He made sure his words carried weight. When he said it, you knew it was coming, and there wasn't anything you could do. Bird's impact on the Celtics and the NBA as a whole cannot be overstated. Throughout the 1980s, Bird led Boston to 3 championships while building one of the fiercest rivalries in sports history with the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Magic. In addition to his offensive brilliance, Bird was underrated defensively. Barkley often pointed out that Bird's defensive efforts weren't explosive, but calculated. His positioning, anticipation, and instincts made him a solid defender for most of his career. Barkley once said, "Larry didn't use speed or hops on defense. He used his brain." And somehow, it still worked. And what separated Bird from many greats was his ability to elevate those around him. He wasn't just the Celtics star, he was their leader, inspiring teammates to rise to expectations. Barkley outlined Bird's unique ability to make teammates feel valued and confident on the court. Larry knew how to set up his teammates perfectly. He didn't force himself onto the game. He let everyone else shine too, Barkley noted. His leadership came full circle during his MVP seasons from 1984 to 1986, where he averaged more than 25 points per game while orchestrating one of the most successful runs in league history. Barkley openly praised Bird's peak years and often acknowledged the difficulty of matching up against someone who had every tool imaginable. The defining aspect of Bird's greatness, especially in Barkley's eyes, was never just talent, but his mental toughness. Bird played through injuries that would sideline most players, further proving his resilience. Barkley elaborated, Larry wasn't afraid of pain or failure. He just kept going, no matter what was thrown his way, and his relentless approach could wear down opponents mentally. While Bird retired early in 1992 due to chronic back issues, his legacy remains untouchable, competing against one of the best to ever play the game. Larry made me better. He made everyone better because you had to bring your best just to survive against him, Barkley admitted. The numbers validate Bird's dominance. 3 MVPs, 3 championships, and career averages of 24.3 points, 10 rebounds, and 6.3 assists speak to his all-around brilliance. For Barkley, Bird wasn't just a rival. He was a benchmark. His mastery of the game challenged Barkley to focus on strategy and discipline instead of relying solely on athleticism. That kind of lasting impact defines Bird's legacy as one of the toughest players to compete against. Hakeem Olajuwon, the Dream Destroyer. A 7-footer with the agility of a guard and the precision of a surgeon, Olajuwon was an enigma opponents struggled, even failed to decode. Barkley admitted that playing against him was one of the most challenging experiences of his career, saying Hakeem was unreal. He had moves like a guard and the footwork of a dancer. I had to play my absolute best just to keep up. For Barkley, Hakeem was never just a peer on the court, but later also a master, a player whose sheer dedication and craft earned respect beyond rivalry. His journey started not in the usual American basketball pipeline, but halfway across the globe in Lagos, Nigeria. Growing up playing soccer, young Hakeem had no idea he'd become one of the most dominant basketball players in history. Barkley admired his soccer roots and often credited them with shaping his unmatchable agility and balance. The way Hakeem moved on the court, you just knew he came from something different. He didn't move like other big men. He moved like a guard who somehow grew to 7 feet tall, Barkley explained. It wasn't until Hakeem traveled to America to attend the University of Houston that basketball began to take center stage in his life. There, alongside Clyde Drexler as part of the iconic Phi Slama Jama squad, Hakeem emerged as a dominant force in college basketball, leading Houston to multiple Final Four appearances. While Drexler brought the flash, Hakeem brought the fundamentals. Barkley mentioned years later how Hakeem's college days reflected his approach to the game. Even back then, you could see how smart he was about basketball. He didn't waste energy and always looked like he was 3 steps ahead of the game. When Hakeem was selected by the Houston Rockets as the first overall pick in the 1984 NBA draft, it marked the start of something legendary. The league quickly realized that Hakeem wasn't just another promising rookie. He was different. An easy blending finesse with power, fully capable of shutting down opponents on both ends of the court. Barkley faced Hakeem shortly after entering the league himself, and it didn't take long for him to feel the weight of the challenge. "I'd get in the paint, thinking I could muscle him," Barkley recalled. "Then he'd spin so fast." Hakeem had more than just physical gifts. Barkley often referred to Hakeem's ability to outthink opponents. He made moves based on what you thought he'd do, and by the time you reacted, it was too late. One of his most unguardable weapons was his footwork in the post. Barkley raved about Hakeem's signature dream shake move, the subtle fake that left defenders frozen in place. Barkley admitted, "I knew it was coming, but no matter how many times I saw it, I couldn't stop it. Nobody could." While his offensive game was mesmerizing, his defensive presence was just as intimidating. He didn't just block shots, he controlled the paint, neutralizing any player brave enough to enter his territory. Hakeem led the NBA in blocked shots multiple times during his career, and Barkley once described him as the best defensive center I've ever seen. He didn't need to foul you, he just made sure you couldn't score. For Barkley, competing against Hakeem was a mental warfare. His humility often played a role in frustrating opponents. Barkley explained, "Here's the thing about Hakeem. He didn't talk trash at all. He just humbled you game after game without saying a word. And if you talked to him after, you felt even worse because he was such a nice guy." Hakeem's peak came during the mid-1990s when he led the Rockets to back-to-back NBA championships in 1994 and 1995. During that run, Hakeem carried Houston on his back, outclassing legendary figures like Patrick Ewing and Shaq to win Finals MVP both years. Barkley respected Hakeem's ability to rise to monumental challenges, saying, "Hakeem didn't have superstar teammates during those runs. He just took over and did it himself." In 1996, Barkley joined Hakeem in Houston, giving him the rare opportunity to learn alongside one of his toughest rivals. As teammates, Barkley saw a different side of Hakeem, the work ethic, the dedication, and the humility. Barkley said in an interview after retiring, "Being Hakeem's teammate was incredible. The guy didn't just have no weaknesses, he worked every day as if he was still trying to prove something. He inspired everyone around him." Barkley often mentioned how Hakeem's humility set him apart. He was one of the greatest players ever, but acted like a rookie who was just happy to be there. "No ego, just basketball and hard work," Barkley stated. Their partnership did one of the most rewarding experiences of his career. By the time Hakeem retired in 2002, he had established himself as one of the greatest players in NBA history. His accolades include 12 All-Star selections, 2 championships, 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, and ranking first all-time in career blocks. But Barkley argued that numbers didn't define Hakeem's greatness. You could count the stats, but they wouldn't explain how impossible Hakeem was to stop. He was never just a great player, he was the perfect center. His mastery of basketball forced Barkley to rethink his approach, making him a better player. In interviews years later, Barkley often reflected on their rivalry and friendship, referring to Hakeem as the most complete player I ever shared the court with, whether as a teammate or opponent. And that for Barkley, he was the benchmark for greatness, the gold standard of basketball execution and humility. Patrick Ewing, the physical wall. He brought size, grit, and toughness to a whole new level on the basketball court, and for Barkley, facing Ewing meant preparing for a war of attrition, endurance, and moments of pure willpower. He was a force of nature, and his journey began in Kingston, Jamaica, where he was born before moving to the United States at the age of 12. The transition wasn't easy. Adjusting to a new culture and a new way of life was no small challenge for the young Ewing. Barkley admired how Ewing embraced every challenge head-on, saying, "Patrick didn't just adapt to adversity, he thrived in it. That's what made him so tough." Once Ewing settled in the state, basketball quickly became his calling. Playing for Cambridge Rindge and Latin School in Massachusetts, he dominated as a high school player, drawing national attention and laying the foundation for his legendary career. Barkley once reflected on Ewing's early days, pointing out how his raw physicality and competitive spirit were visible even back then. Patrick wasn't just big, he had this determination about him. You could see it early on. From high school, Ewing became one of the most sought-after prospects in basketball, eventually choosing to play for the Georgetown Hoyas. Under legendary coach John Thompson, Ewing became the centerpiece of one of the most feared college basketball programs of the era. At Georgetown, his reputation as a tough, physical competitor began to truly take shape. Barkley said, Patrick already had NBA-level physicality at Georgetown. You could see why everyone feared him in college. He was dominant on both ends of the floor. Ewing led Georgetown to 3 NCAA championship game appearances during his college career, winning the title in 1984. Along the way, he established himself as a defensive juggernaut, terrorizing opponents with his shot blocking and interior presence. Barkley admired Ewing's ability to change the game defensively, saying Patrick didn't just block shots, he made opponents afraid to attack the rim. That's a different level of dominance. When he was selected as the first overall pick by the New into the league as one of the most hyped prospects ever, Ewing faced expectations that would have suffocated most players. But for him, the challenge wasn't intimidating, it was motivating. And he quickly established himself as one of the NBA's best big men, blending raw power with surprising finesse. Barkley described Ewing's unique skill set by saying,
I mean, I tell people, man, you guys sleep on Patrick. You know, he just, none of us could get past Michael, but that man was great going back to college.
One of Ewing's defining traits was his ability to rise to the occasion in the toughest matchups, and his jump shot was another weapon that separated him from other big men of his era. Barkley recalled how Ewing's refined scoring touch made him impossible to defend. Patrick wasn't just a post player. He had this perfect jump shot, and once he got that off, there wasn't much you could do. Defensively, Patrick was equally dominant. Barkley often admired how Ewing could anchor the Knicks' defense, saying Patrick controlled the paint. No one wanted to challenge him in there, and even if you tried, he'd make you regret it. Ewing's toughness was never limited to his physicality, but it extended into his mindset and approach to the game. For Barkley, squaring off against Ewing meant facing one of the league's most relentless players on both ends of the court. The Knicks centered their identity on Ewing's grit, and his leadership turned New York into one of the toughest teams in 1990s basketball. Barkley said, Patrick was the heart and soul of those Knicks teams. If you wanted to beat New York, you had to go through him, and that was no easy task. Despite his physical dominance, he was often underappreciated by those who didn't understand the emotional toll he put on opponents. And his peak years came during the early to mid-1990s, when he led the Knicks to multiple deep playoff runs. While his teams often fell short against the dynasties of the era, particularly Michael Jordan's Bulls, Ewing's individual brilliance never wavered. Barkley respected how Ewing carried the weight of New York's expectations, saying Patrick represented everything about New York, tough, relentless, and unwilling to make excuses. One of Ewing's most notable seasons came in 1994, when he led the Knicks to the NBA Finals against Hakeem Olajuwon and the Houston Rockets. The series showcased Ewing's abilities on the biggest stage, but ultimately ended in heartbreak as the Rockets claimed the title in 7 games. Barkley didn't see the loss as a failure for Ewing. Instead, he praised Ewing for how he fought during that series. Patrick gave everything in that finals. He wasn't playing for himself, he was playing for New York, and you could see it in every possession. By the time Patrick retired in 2002, his legacy was cemented as one of the greatest centers in NBA history. His accolades include 11 All-Star selections, 7 All-NBA team honors, and ranks that place him among the league's most prolific scorers and defenders. But Barkley argued that numbers couldn't fully capture Ewing's essence. Patrick wasn't about stats. You couldn't measure what he did by counting rebounds or blocks. You measured it by how much pain you went through just trying to match his intensity. And for this, Patrick will always be remembered as one of the NBA's toughest challenges. A player whose physicality, skill, and mentality shaped an era of ferocious competition. Karl Malone, the freight train, known as the mailman, is arguably Charles Barkley's fiercest rival. Malone's chiseled physique, relentless pace, and unparalleled ability to punish defenders every single night made him the ultimate test of grit and endurance. The battles between these two legends were like watching titans collide, a showcase of mental toughness and skill that cemented their status as two of the greatest power forwards in NBA history. Barkley summed up their rivalry simply. Playing against Malone was like fighting a tank. You respect that level of fight. Malone's beginnings shaped his approach to the game. Born in Summerfield, Louisiana, he grew up in a rural environment that instilled in him values like hard work and resilience. Raised by his mother, Malone was the youngest of 9 children, leaning on his family's work ethic to push through challenges early in life. Barkley admired the toughness and discipline Malone brought to the court, recognizing that his upbringing had molded him into the relentless player he would become. Malone didn't just have talent, he had drive. And that drive came from a lifetime of hard work, Barkley said. He first turned heads while playing college basketball at Louisiana Tech University. He dominated during his 3 years there, but he didn't yet carry the polished reputation of being an unstoppable force. By the time he was drafted in the first round by the Utah Jazz in the 1985 NBA draft, something clicked. Malone's quiet ascension in Utah took everyone by surprise. His physical strength and athleticism quickly earned him respect as one of the game's elite forwards. Barkley recalled their early matchups, pointing out how Malone could wear opponents down. When Karl came into the league, people weren't ready for how strong he was. He didn't just outplay you, he outlasted you. With John Stockton feeding him pinpoint passes, he developed a knack for precision scoring and punishing finishes around the rim. Barkley described Malone's ability to capitalize on even the smallest openings, saying, "It didn't matter how good your defense was. Karl found a way. He hit you, he wore you down, and by the fourth quarter, you were the one breaking, not him." His basketball IQ was as sharp as his physicality. He mastered the pick and roll alongside Stockton, creating one of the most lethal offensive duos in NBA history. Their clashes weren't only about skill but endurance as well. Malone never wavered from his physical style of play, attacking opponents from start to finish. Barkley admitted that matching Malone's pace was one of the hardest things he had to do during his career. Karl didn't take plays off. He was coming at you for 48 minutes, and if you couldn't keep up, you got left behind. Malone set the standard for consistency, playing 19 years in the NBA and rarely missing games due to injury. His durability became a hallmark of his career, solidifying his reputation as a machine-like competitor. Barkley reflected on how that durability added to Malone's dominance. You could beat Karl once maybe, but the next night, he was back and he was even tougher. He never let up. It was unreal. One of his trademarks, other than his strength, was his ability to finish in transition. His charging runs to the basket were both frightening and effective, earning him the nickname the Freight Train. Barkley recalled how daunting it was to see Malone barrel down the court at full speed. When Karl got going, there was nothing you could do. He was too strong and too quick. If you tried to stop him, you'd just get run over. And his mid-range jump shot completely set him apart from traditional power forwards. The battles between Barkley and Malone weren't just individual showcases. They were often pivotal moments for their teams. Whether it was Barkley's Phoenix Suns or Malone's Utah Jazz, these matchups provided fans with some of the most memorable confrontations of the late 80s and 90s. Malone's ability to adapt and impose his will on any matchup was something Barkley deeply respected. And his peak came during the mid to late 1990s, when he carried the Jazz to 2 consecutive NBA Finals appearances in 1997 and 1998. Despite ultimately falling short against MJ's Chicago Bulls, Malone's consistent brilliance in those series didn't go unnoticed. Barkley admired how Malone carried his team during those intense postseason runs. Karl wasn't afraid to take over. He wanted the ball in the biggest moments, and his team knew they could count on him. By the time Malone retired in 2004 as the second leading scorer in NBA history, his legacy was indelible. Over 36,000 career points, 2 MVP awards, and a reputation as one of the all-time greats left no doubt about his contribution to the game. Barkley often emphasized that Malone's work ethic was his defining trait. Karl didn't just dominate, he showed how discipline and preparation could make you great. That's something every player should learn. For Barkley, Malone was a benchmark of toughness, resilience, and relentless intensity. While the Barkley-Malone rivalry is remembered for its fiery head-to-head battles, it was also a celebration of what made both players extraordinary. Malone's consistency and physicality solidify him as a player whose influence will always endure in NBA history. As Barkley said it best, the mailman always delivered, and if you weren't ready, he'd leave you in the dust. These remarkable players earned Barkley's respect through sheer talent, toughness, and heart. They weren't just legends in their own right. They pushed Barkley to rise to new heights, honing his skills and shaping his legacy as one of the greatest to ever play the game. All right, that's all for today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.